shift. And Sheldon is going to be speaking to us today on this, and he's been engaging ACM for the last couple of years on the changes that have been going on and working closely with CRKN, SFU, UAT, and Waterloo. And Sheldon is the Associate University Librarian for Collections at the University of New Brunswick. So over to you, Sheldon. Looking forward to hearing all about ACM. I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. You'd think I'd never done a Zoom meeting before. Yeah, Sheldon Armstrong, AUL Collections. Just a quick correction. I'm at University of British Columbia. So yeah, we've been engaging ACM around the changes. I want to say actually the first time that ACM approached us was probably just before 2020, the pandemic. So we've kind of had it on our radar, but certainly the temperature has risen closer as we get to that sort of change date that ACM is wanting to go. So ACM is changing its publishing model, moving from a subscription model, where pretty much all Canadian post-secondary libraries subscribe to that ACM digital library. That library itself is sort of content is locked behind a paywall unless researchers pay an APC, not unlike other publishers. Um, the total annual subscription costs across Canada are roughly about 300,000 USD. So this is, some figures that ACM has provided to us, during our negotiations activities. So what do they want to do? They want to move into an open access model. They are stating that it's their membership actually that is driving this change. They, have given direction to ACM to move that in down that path. Um, Essentially, what will happen the start of 2026 is that ACM digital library content that's published there will become open access, where Canadian researchers publish at no additional cost. That's what they would like us to move to, where libraries are essentially signing agreements with them, and APCs are covered. Uh, they have put together a system that I'll go into, a model, but essentially at sort of list price, if you can use that description, that total comes to about 785,000 USD. So it's a substantial increase in the revenue that they would be well, I don't want to say extracting, but getting from Canadian institutions. So the model is basically a 10-tiered system. It is based on a averaged 3-year article output for every one of those institutions to uh, um, determine which tier an institution is slotted into. So, for example, UBC, our average article output is in the for the last 3 years is around 50, 51 articles. And so we would be tiered at level three. And you can kind of see that uh, that the pricing for those tiers are fairly substantial when you get to the top. So, the difference between tier two and tier one is 25,000, tier three, 24 is 15, 10. So, it's quite significant if you're in tier three, which UBC finds itself, and you're a little bit worried about, what that future is, right? Because if the article output increases, you actually may be moving up tiers. Um, So right now, those APC costs for a researcher is around $1,000 for a conference proceeding paper, and 1,800 for a journal article. And one thing that we've learned over time, and discussing with a number of computer science faculty at UBC is that if you're a member, an ACM member, you actually do not pay these rates. So it's about 70% less. So $700 for a conference proceeding paper and 1,300 for a journal article, something like that. So um, there's a couple of key points here that sort of entrench it in the not sustainable column for us. The first is that in engaging computer science faculty members at UBC, we've learned that authors are already engaging in strategic selection of who the corresponding author would be. So if they're in a multi-institutional research group, and they're going to publish with ACM, when it comes time to do the assigning of who the corresponding author is, they will actually go and see, whose institution has an agreement with ACM, and then that person becomes the corresponding author because their APCs are waived, essentially. So what you can see is that you potentially could have more corresponding authors at your institution through this strategic method that some of the researchers are employing. And what does that do? Increases your article output and potentially moving you up into a higher tier and a higher associated cost as well. The other thing that is fairly concerning would be that about precedent setting for other publishers. So, um, you know, I'm on the CRKN Content Strategy Committee, being involved in some of those transformative agreement negotiations. And, we've really um, uh, sought to contain the costs of those deals to not include any previous APC amounts that were um, uh, 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 um, a revenue stream for the publisher outside of the subscription deals. So it's, when you have somebody, a publisher that is basically modeling their entire um, uh, revenue on article output and associated APC costs, you begin to worry that that's a domino and others will move into that area as well. So yeah, it's been quite concerning around that. So what I just wanted to illustrate a little bit here is that so most of ACM digital library subscriptions, they've been negotiated through regional consortia, and those costs are pretty similar right across for everybody, all of the institutions. Um, but if we rank sort of the top 8 tiers, you can see that the bigger outputting institutions, um, they make up probably, so this total 546 is you know a pretty good ballpark, I think, when we're talking about what would be the value of sort of the whole cost of what we should be expecting from ACM. I would say that, in the past, when we've looked at ACM Digital Library and the usage that we've done at UBC, uh, um, I'm pretty surprised that we've only ever paid, 5,000 USD for this. I don't think that that especially when you compare it to some of the other comparable products, which are, significantly higher. Maybe we have been paying less for it. So that's not something that I would argue against with them. Um, so just to kind of go back into what the past activity has been. Um, so ACM engaged UBC in around 2019. Around 2023, the regional consortia actually engaged CRKN on the negotiations of this. So CRKN, plus some of the content strategy committee members, as well as the regional consortia, engaged ACM. And we expressed to them, all of our concerns, how this could affect us, um, uh, you know, research infrastructure in Canada is not like it is in other countries. The exchange rate, a large number of concerns that we expressed with them. And they were not willing to move at all from the model. It was a lengthy conversation, and at the end of it, you kind of felt like they didn't hear a word that we had said. So, um, in 2024, specifically in the spring, UBC, SFU, Waterloo, and U of T being those top institutions, outputting institutions that I had put on that graph. We met to discuss some strategy here. So, going back to the 5,000 US that each of us are kind of paying right now. Uh, Waterloo would be going from 5,000 to 95,000. And, U of T as well. Waterloo is not U of T, right? So there's no consideration in, any of the other factors that uh, uh, ACM was proposing. It was just a straight our way or no way sort of take it. Oh, and what I should say is that uh, the only other option would be that at the end of their decision to move into this open strategy, um, was if the library had not signed on or the institution had not signed on, then any faculty members from that institution, if they wanted to publish with ACM, they would have to pay the APC. So, that's problematic. Um, as ACM, especially in the computer science area and a few other areas, that really is their area of publication, right? Like that's the if they um, uh, um, are concerned about their career, they want to advance, that's the only spot that's really available to them. Uh, so myself, and AULs from the other institutions, we met in March and we wrote a letter to ACM really requesting to come back to the table, have a discussion, and requested a made in Canada approach that sort of acknowledged the issues that we face in this country. So we met in April, and at that time, it wasn't a great conversation at all. We booked an hour. They did their best, I think, to filibuster for the better part of that hour. We tried to get words in, break up, but they didn't really. Again, they weren't. Willing to hear us or make changes to the tier system. But they did move down from that 785, and so they'd moved to what would be a model that they said they could accept if it was an all-in, and the cost would be about 685,000. So they had moved down by about $100,000. So negotiations, um, well, I can't say that. After that time, um, we uh, I engaged with faculty members at UBC. I've always kept them up to date on how it was going. And really what we did was a little bit of brinksmanship, right? So, seeing who could hold out as much as possible. Um, but we did in the fall have a little bit of movement, and our negotiations have resumed with a November meeting. Um, this is just something that I had put together just to show uh, something that I kind of think is a little bit misleading, right? So, like I had said before, um, uh, ACM members, which is only costs $100 a year, they pay a substantial less APC fee for both conference papers and journal papers. Um, and a lot of schools out there have certainly done their own evaluation of what their publication rates have been, looked at what the costs are, and it kind of makes sense if when I did the calculations for the list price APCs that if UBC was slotted in at that 50,000 tier, we're actually going to get a deal. That makes a lot of sense. But again, and it's kind of come up in our negotiations, the vast majority of the individuals that are publishing with ACM are most likely already members. They would only pay the 700 and 1,300. And so when you recalculate what the costs would be, it's actually lower than what our tier three rate would be, right? So it's not I found it a little bit frustrating because just like myself, We did the back of the napkin math, and it made sense at that point. But then when you look again, and really they don't, or at least they didn't in the summertime, make this component, the membership APC costs, as apparent. And it was actually one of our Faculty of Science members that pointed this out to me. So yeah, it's a little bit concerning there. Uh, as well, ACM in their accounting of the model, they're really only factoring in like a 60 to 70% worldwide uptake on this model. So that's interesting as well. And then I would say the last thing is that, and we've asked this a couple of times, because in overall, they say their model is cost neutral. Um, but they've not explained what those extra funds from Canada would offset, right? So there's no sort of transparency that, yes, Canada is going up, but some other part of the world is going down or something. So like I had mentioned, there is a bit of an update. Craig Olsvik and myself have met with ACM a few weeks ago. They made another offer. We are still waiting on that written confirmation with the details that came out in that meeting. Um, and Craig has confirmed with me that he's kind of kept Consortia Canada in the loop on these negotiations. So um, they have moved away from their all-in model. They've moved away from the use of their tiered system. They've proposed a multi-year agreement with total costs that would be stepped up over 3 years. They've reduced that total amount again, so they've moved off the 685 number. Um, and they've confirmed that at the end of that agreement, it would only be a normal sort of percentage increase that we would expect, um, or potentially they said decreases depending on article output. So it's I don't want to uh, state too much there, because until we get it in writing, uh, you know, it's just a better meeting than I've ever had with ACM in the last number of years. So next steps, we're just waiting for that written proposal and whatever documentation. We'll review that offer. And then, because they've sort of moved away from us using their internal tiered slotting system. How do we devise an internal pricing model within Canada, right? So that to me is going to be the next big step, to see what is acceptable, what can people afford. We'll have to discuss either um, CRKN members, maybe to the CSC membership. But one thing that I'm hoping to do is include regional consortia in that discussion as well, and on any new models. But um, you know, hopefully all of this comes to some resolution soon. So I can stop there, and hopefully we can just have a good discussion. Um, I will say, the yeah, it's been a really difficult, long, running discussion with them, um, and it really affects Canadian institutions at a really bad time, right? So I think we're all struggling in a number of different ways. Exchange rate, international students, so I do feel that through that last meeting that we had with them, they sort of heard that it resonated with them, and they actually did some work to come back with us to us with um, a viable solution. So I'll stop there, take questions, and